Oh, what up, dude? I'm just chilling here in Miami. I'm glad I got such a lax job, I hardly have to do anything. And yet, I'm still getting paid by the UN. Miami has become the go-to vacation spot for peacemakers like me. It's great, honestly. Cool beach, cool woman, cool shops. It's just really cool. Huh? Why are you confused? Oh, is it because I said I'm a peacemaker and not a peacekeeper? Right, I forgot we've only been called peacemakers and peace bringers for a little while now. Sit down, bro. Today is a great day, and I don't gotta do shit. I can tell you all about it. I know I said I wouldn't do another TFR video until 1.1 dropped, but not too long after I posted my video on France, this really cool submod that adds content to the United Nations mission in Florida was published. I couldn't resist and decided to make a video on it. At the start of the year of 2020, the United States of America stood at the height of it all. It was the world's superpower, being in command of the strongest military alliance in the world, having the best economy, which was only rivaled by China, and having the best military you could dream of. Countries around the world can only wish they were this strong. Well, it's not that perfect. The United States is not as united as you would expect it to be. The nation is deeply divided, as culture wars have begun. And the nation is divided between the populists of the Republican Party and the neoliberals of the Democratic Party. The Democrats claimed sitting President Trump was a tyrant and neo-fascist, while his supporters in the MAGA bloc of the party claim he's the best president in decades. After President Trump's State of the Union address, there was a lot of controversy because of the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, ripping up the speech behind Trump. People are so unhappy with Trump to the point where even the Speaker of the House is openly critical of the president. The people have grown very unhappy with the president, opting to support former Vice President Joe Biden's bid for the presidency. So, the culture war was already splitting the nation right down the middle, but that virus in China that I mentioned earlier has become a much bigger problem than anyone expected. China did a poor job of containing the spread of COVID-19. People traveling out of China brought the virus with them, causing COVID-19 to be diagnosed in America. So not only did the Democrats and Republicans have the culture war and other frivolous things to argue over, they now had COVID to yap about. To the benefit of the Democrats, Trump had yet to properly respond to the rising pandemic, which made the Democrats' chances at electoral victory much higher. Oil prices were rising, and Trump failed to actually mitigate the problem when it arose. Trump, being the loudmouth hothead, claimed gas prices would go back down without delay, but this claim would come back to bite him. Something to note is this event about the Atomwaffen division disbanding. Who are the Atomwaffen, I hear you asking? Well, in short, they are National Socialist terrorists who seek to bring in a new age by dropping nuclear bombs everywhere. They are completely insane. So to hear that they disbanded was relieving, but is this just a farce? How do we know they're not just in hiding? How can we trust what the federal government is saying? That's irrelevant. Back on topic. Trump did expand the CDC to fight COVID, but he didn't give them the needed funds to make it a complete non-issue like some other countries have done. The Democrats' expectations of Trump's response to COVID were high, and despite many of them believing to be ultimately reasonable, the GOP still refused to agree to them. The zealousness of the GOP did not sit well with the leftist population of the United States, as anarcho-communists seized control of Capitol Hill in Seattle. The workers began striking, as Trump had not done much to help them in a time when unemployment was on the rise. Despite the anarchists being largely DNC voters, the problem is that their methods are far too extreme. Lighting random people's cars on fire, assaulting people with a slightly different opinion, and straight up committing treason by establishing a commune in Seattle? The anarchists are completely insane, and that is why Biden opted to abandon them in his campaign. The lack of support from the DNC resulted in local police crushing Chaz with very little issue. The anarchists felt betrayed by the Democrats, but chaos is not the way forward. Order, peace, and democracy are. The anarchists lost too much support, forcing them to call off the White House siege. The broader left wing felt betrayed by the DNC, causing Biden's chances of winning to decline. Gas prices finally skyrocketed, as the earlier death of the Saudi king set off a chain reaction that has turned into the Saudi Arabian civil war. President Trump authorized an expedition to Saudi Arabia to help the government in Operation Arabian Stability. However, Trump was confident our forces were too perfect to fail, so they went in with zero support companies. Trump was fully aware he had lost a vote. He delayed the results, trying to claim there was a miscount, but that only further ruined his image. The media called for Biden, and sure enough, he was certified as the next president and officially inaugurated a few days later. Despite the tyrannical Trump administration being out of power, America was not immediately saved. Even with the neoliberal Biden in power, several people had turned against him and the Democratic Party. It's not just the DNC who are struggling, but the GOP is already on its way out. Just before Biden was certified as president, the GOP finally collapsed as the neoconservative Old Guard and the MAGA America First group under Trump could no longer find common ground. The far left and the far right have had enough of just letting the moderate center control everything, passing policies that vaguely hurt or help one wing of the spectrum. These groups are preparing to take up arms and fight for what they believe to be rightfully theirs. As Trump establishes his rival government in a NORAD control room in Denver, a second American Civil War is inevitable, and Biden can only delay it. Stopping it is impossible. In that time, groups like the Patriot Front are organizing, and several communist groups have come together to form the American People's Liberation Army. The United Nations is actively monitoring the situation in America. There are calls for a peacekeeper mission to be launched in America if a new civil war is to come to fruition. The UN peacekeepers don't have a great track record, having been associated with doing fucking nothing to help victims, a reputation they gained from Rwanda that they have yet to live down. The mission would end up being approved just mere days before Wall Street crashed for the second time in history, and half of the army ceased communications with the president. Just a few days later, the United States of America collapsed into dozens upon dozens of warlords. Among the warlords were Biden and Trump's federalist governments, individual state governments, extremist forces, anti-fascist guerrillas, and gangs. One gang in Florida, La Raza, would take control of the city of Miami in the immediate chaos following the collapse of order in America. However, their rule over the city is just a footnote in history, as the United Nations was planning in advance to land in Miami if the USA collapsed. The gang stood no chance against the UN peacekeepers, who are professionally trained military staff from all over the world. The United Nations may control Miami, but the greater Miami area is not enough. The problem is that the UN cannot help the locals if Florida as a whole is still controlled by warlords. The UN mission in Florida needs to occupy the whole peninsula if our mission is to fulfill its purpose. Now, the problem is that we don't have a reasonable justification to open fire on the local militias. Or at least, we didn't. Remember Atomoffen? Well, they're the only warlord we border, and they are practically an enemy to everyone around them. They are Satanist, occultist Nazis. No, that's not a joke. They regularly sacrifice and raid towns to fulfill their apocalyptic economy, and they would massacre a small town near our HQ. The Atomoffen will undoubtedly do this to all of Florida if we don't do anything. The massacre of an innocent small town has warranted a full military response by the United Nations, ending any chance we had at being neutral. Peacekeeping is a joke. We need to do more. We need to make peace if we want any chance of making an impact. Soon, all hell broke loose, and all theaters of the Second American Civil War kicked off.
We apologize for interrupting your broadcast, but we come to you with a major news announcement. After the Washington and Denver governments refused diplomacy, the United States of America has completely collapsed and a civil war has begun. This has profound implications in the whole world, as a world policeman has now vanished. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization now finds itself without a leader. We will update you on the situation as it occurs.
The first thing we did was call for additional auxiliary brigades to be formed, as our immediate efforts were against the Atomoffen division. Due to our forces being crammed into Miami, breaking through took some time, but eventually we broke through Atomwaffen's lines and encircled some Atomwaffen divisions. We swiftly launched an attack on their HQ, Fort Myers. The attack worked, and Atomwaffen is now crippled. We brought in the Red Cross, a humanitarian organization, to help the civilian populace of Florida recover from the greatest war in the 21st century. Bringing them in allows us to focus on unifying Florida under the UN mission, all while refugee camps can be regularly manned. The cities of Florida need to heal if we are to be successful in our mission on the peninsula. If Florida is in good condition, then the region will recover and may even be how we achieve something even greater. After appealing to Europe, Spain agreed to form 2 motorized divisions to help us fight in Florida. They helped us crush the last remnants of Atomwaffen, ending the satanic threat to America. We managed to break through the old state government's front line, allowing our peacemakers to drive to Florida's westernmost cities and force DeSantis to surrender. We were fully focused on the local gang near Orlando, and with all our other opponents down, the gang died really easily. Florida was officially unified by the UN mission.
We come to you live with a major development in the United States of America. The United Nations mission in Florida has reported that it has fully taken control over the whole state. Extremist groups like the Atomwaffen Division and the old state government have been defeated. Refugees are now actively flocking to the peninsula to avoid the chaos of the Civil War. However, there are claims that the UN will be expanding its mission to more of the country. Stay tuned to find out more.
With control over Florida solidified, we made our proper Unit V's Peacemaker templates. They're really basic, just light infantry with support artillery, but they're a lot better than a lot of the militias fighting in America right now, so until further notice, it's fine. The mission at first was to secure Florida for the United Nations to prevent harm from consuming the Floridian people. This is what we've been doing, as we fully occupied a state and are actively rebuilding it. However, we are also massively investing in military factories in Florida. Why? Well, something has become apparent. The Washington and Denver governments are going to throw men at each other until their reserves run dry, and the extremists of the APLA, the Patriot Front, and the National Socialist movement will take advantage of that and invade the rest of America. Once the democratic governments fall, totalitarianism will firmly embed itself in America, the one place where it has no right to do so. The United Nations will have no choice but to expand its mission outside of just Florida. The UN will save America as a whole. United Nations administered Florida will become United Nations administered America, and the evils of extremism will be kept dead for good, and peace will be made. The need to expand our mission to all of America is made apparent by how we are super dependent on international resources, which can be fixed by taking America's. The peacekeepers will do more than just keep the peace. We will make the peace, whether the fascists of Boston or the Marxists of Sacramento want us to. The UN Security Council isn't enthusiastic about this shift in plans, but they either aren't willing to or able to stop it for one reason or another. If we are to invade the rest of America, we will need a strong economy to support a strong military. A bad economy will severely hamper our peacemaking efforts in America. I was hoping I would have more time to prepare, but the Patriot Front, the National Socialist Movement, and the League of the South were now in an alliance dubbed the National Front, and were at war with Biden's Union of America. The Washington government is going to lose with their intervention, and if the nationalists get control over everything east of the Mississippi, there is no chance of success for our mission. We have to intervene, and we have to intervene now. We officially invoked Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, marking the beginning of our efforts to restore peace in America. We began our march north, though it was slow due to the League of the South being reinforced by the rest of the National Front. The Southern Federal Command was much easier to fight though. Still, very slow advance all around. This was a massive task for us, one we may not be able to pull off alone. However, there was a way we could get an ally in the war. The state of Texas at first was loyal to Trump's Denver government. This position only became stronger as Biden's position crumbled. However, the mistakes of Trump's government were not forgotten by those in Texas. This is reflected by the Republican Party in Denver being split into 3 factions, all of which are fighting for supremacy. Republican Party infighting has caused the state of Texas to doubt Trump's ability to govern, especially as he grows older and says stupider stuff.
In Springfield, They're eating the dogs.
Hell, there are still Republicans in DC, being the neoconservative bloc led by Mitt Romney. Greg Abbott's Texas only really sided with Trump because of a lack of options. Well, what if we were to provide him with another option? We sent a telegram to Texas, proposing that they join up with us in our mission to restore peace in America. To our surprise, Texan discontent with Trump was higher than we expected, so Greg Abbott agreed to switch sides and join the UN mission to save America. This has boosted our efforts, meaning we can now get a stronger position in the South.
We come to you live with an unexpected development in the United States. The state of Texas under Greg Abbott has announced an alliance with the United Nations mission in America. The reason is unknown, but it's suspected that the Texan people are fed up with the indecisiveness of Trump's divided government. Many Republicans criticize this decision, but Greg Abbott says his decision is final.
Despite Texas reinforcing our peacemakers, the war against the National Front still was not an easy one. We were recruiting more and more Americans in our fight, but it would still be a while before we could get cores on the land we occupied. While we pushed against the National Front wherever we could, we began working on our plan to revolutionize America. Agenda 2030.
No, not that schizophrenic shit the World Economic Forum is pushing for.
It's just meant to make everything much more efficient and effective by 2030. Nothing crazy. It will take time to implement, but it will hopefully bear fruit. The topic of currency came up, and although some people wanted the dollar to be maintained, the peacemakers demanded that a new currency for the United Nations be set up. Because they controlled basically everything, this is what we did. Although Texas opened our western frontier, my main focus was on the eastern seaboard. I believed that if we could take the eastern United States, we would be all set and victory would be mine. Because the advance was pretty slow, I had a lot of time to reform the peacemakers. The problem was that the peacekeepers were designed to be more like garrisons, not frontline units. This means they're not properly fitted to fight enemy troops in standard warfare. The switch from peacekeepers to peacemakers isn't that simple, and we can use this time to enact vital army reforms to make the peacemakers really good. The League of the South was unable to withstand pressure from us, Texas, and Trump, so they opted to surrender their territory to us. After this, Texas was fully annexed by our administration. Despite being willingly annexed though, we did not get cores. That's fun. For sure. The fight against the National Front still wasn't fun, but it was going a bit better. One major problem we were having was that we didn't have enough guns to supply our troops. Although importing guns is a good option, we can't be over-reliant on the outside world. We need our own gun design to hand out to our troops. We had a bid, and we chose the ACR as our new standard rifle. It'll take some time, but soon enough, it will be the only rifle our troops need. With our new rifles, our forces could push north into Union territory because we're also at war with Biden for some reason. Biden's forces were in complete disarray, allowing us to enter the White House. Despite our success, the advance north was still slow, but we were winning. So I decided to keep going. We were getting close to running out of soldiers to recruit in Florida, but being an international forum, the UN was able to get us soldiers from all over the world, which helped with the issue. Eventually, the Union of America surrendered, so the land had to be divided between us, Trump, and the National Front. I got as much as I could from the chaotic peace deal. Things were looking up for us as I began a big offensive that was looking highly promising. Not only were we gaining good ground against the nationalists, but I also got the great news that we could finally begin integrating new land into our administration, as polls in South Carolina showed that the locals accepted our rule and were willing to fight for us. Everything was looking good, so of course something had to go wrong. Right as the push against the nationalists was going great, Trump declared war on us. This completely changed the war, as we now had a strong enemy ready to attack. Now, Trump was actively engaging the American People's Liberation Army on the West Coast, but he was still the biggest threat to us. We needed to eliminate the nationalists as fast as we could. Luckily, the nationalists were weak enough so that we could just snake to their victory points. Well, mostly. This worked against the Patriot Front, and after some slow snaking, they surrendered to us. However, we still needed to be very careful. We had lost too many guns by now, and unlike Colonel Cam, I'm not willing to go on the attack with units with less strength than this dude. While we waited for our gun deficit to be resolved or at least return to decent enough levels, we had begun integrating even more of the South. Naturally, the regions we occupied first were also the first to accept integration into the UN administration in America. By integrating more land, we had access to more factories, which we could use for gun production. We also used this downtime to design an improved helmet for our troops. We did begin slowly moving against the NSM, but we were mostly focused on making the front line smaller so we wouldn't be overextended. I did try arranging deals with other factions, but I'm honestly not sure if it had any impact, to be honest. After a while, we had managed to surround the National Socialists in Detroit. However, they had dug in, making Detroit the American Stalingrad. The battle took a while, as the Nazis refused to surrender. Eventually, we brought in some of our armored brigades from the main front, and they provided the extra punch needed to finally break the Nazis. The National Socialist movement surrendered, ending the National Front as a whole. We had managed to push Trump back quite a bit, and he was still mostly focused on the West, so we managed to get everything at a peace conference.
We come to you live with a new development in the United States of America. The United Nations mission in America has officially announced the surrender of the Patriot Front and the National Socialist Movement. Thomas Rousseau and Beck Colucci will be held responsible for the crimes they have committed against the American people. So far, Donald Trump has yet to respond to the United Nations' triumph over the fascists.
We were able to start advancing against Trump sooner than I was expecting, as our gun deficit was actually improving. This is because we were slowly getting more core territory, and Trump actually had even less guns than me. This let us begin pushing against the ACG. I saw an opportunity for a decent pocket in Oklahoma. It was hectic, but the plan worked, and 69,000 men would perish in the city. The momentum was in our favor, as Trump's lands did not have the necessary infrastructure to support an army as big as his. We launched an offensive towards the Canadian border from Iowa, which worked like a charm. Trump couldn't do anything to stop our offensive, especially as most of the East Coast was ready for integration. Eventually, we launched a big offensive against Trump, which was super successful. He had no chance of recovering, and it was our peacemakers that marched on Denver, putting an end to the Denver government.
We come to you live with a new development in the American Civil War. Trump's Denver government has officially surrendered to the United Nations. This leaves a majority of the nation and its industry and population in the hands of the UN. The APLA has reportedly denounced the United Nations, which many nations consider to be a foolish move, as it has now isolated them from much of the international world. Clashes between the United Nations and the APLA are expected to begin any day now.
The fall of Denver marks the beginning of the end for the Second American Civil War, as America finds itself split into two blocks. The Communists, led by Gloria La Riva, are in control of the western United States. The United Nations Administrated America controls everything else. I was confident we would win, so I gave out the order to march west. Although we were stronger, we did make the mistake of underestimating the APLA. The problem is that, unlike past opponents, the APLA had a sizable foreign volunteer force made up of Chinese, Russians, and North Koreans. They posed a considerable threat to us, and I thought I had attacked the APLA too soon. It was because of these foreign volunteers that our advance against the APLA was very slow at first. Things did get a bit better, as Russian volunteers were forced to withdraw as Russia began their invasion of Ukraine, which escalated into a full-scale war with NATO. This meant the Russians wouldn't be able to send troops to the APLA again for quite some time. The Russians leaving the front line was very noticeable, as we started getting decent pockets, like this one in the desert. That was the first of many encirclements we got while fighting the American People's Liberation Army, and sometimes these pockets had foreign troops in them, which were sometimes the only capable enemy units. To make matters worse for the APLA, the Russians would never be helping them again, as the Russians were defeated in the European War. The APLA was struggling without Russia's help, so we managed to reach the Pacific coast. We surrounded their last garrisons in their cities, clearing them one by one. Eventually, the APLA couldn't take it anymore and surrendered. Upon exiting the peace conference, my game crashed. How nice. I reloaded the game and killed the APLA again, and this time the game didn't crash. So now that we've united America, we should do the decision to declare it reunified, right? Well, not so fast. See, this entire time, there's been a balance of power in our government that needs to be resolved before we do anything else. There's a power struggle between the Security Council and the Peacekeepers. Really, the choice was obvious. The Security Council has tried to hinder us at every opportunity, while it was the peacekeepers who made every important decision after we landed in Miami and led us to victory in the end. The Security Council has no right to determine the fate of the UN mission in America. That right is reserved to the people who fought for this. We did the final decisions in the balance of power to get things in favor of the peacekeepers, meaning we could officially consolidate power around them. With power consolidated around the peacekeepers, we needed a new leader. There were 4 candidates with different ideas for what a UN-controlled America should be, but ultimately, it was the disciplined militarist Cheryl Pierce, a peacekeeper general from Australia.
We come to you live with very pleasing news. The Second American Civil War has officially concluded, as the United Nations mission in America has emerged triumphant. Secretary General Cheryl Pierce will likely be managing the nation in the long term. However, with the United States now under international control, we can assume that the country will be properly rebuilt, and maybe one day it will rejoin the global scene.
The United Nations interim forces in America will now be in charge going forward, as the peacekeepers have now evolved. They no longer stand around, allowing the shit they allowed to happen in Rwanda. We will fight to maintain peace and order around the world. The Security Council be damned. Before our peacemakers began engaging in peacemaking operations, we needed to deploy proper units. The peacemakers we made at the beginning of the Second American Civil War were only good against the other warlords. For international peacemaking, we need good professional units. With the massive industry of America, this is a piece of cake. We created the Armored Peacebringers, and they would be our primary units. After some were deployed, Pierce authorized a peacemaking operation in Colombia to re-establish government control. We sent 1 armored peacebringer over and began the intervention. The new units performed amazingly, which was great news for us as the Great Asian War began while we fought in Colombia. I had to rush the Colombian intervention so I could assist the PDTO, but it went well. I deployed 2 peacebringers to Asia, 1 to India and 1 to Korea. North Korea had fallen, but the push into Manchuria was rough. Luckily, the Indian front was a piece of cake. We mostly just ran behind Chinese lands, driving from supply hub to supply hub. The Chinese didn't even bother to stop us. Eventually, the division sent to India managed to link up with the rest of the PDTO, and that's what made China realize they had no shot at saving their situation, forcing the PRC to accept peace and let the PDTO proclaim victory.
We come to you live with a breaking news announcement. The East Asian Defense Initiative led by China has officially surrendered to the Pacific Defense Treaty Organization led by Japan. Experts are claiming that the People's Republic of China will not be able to survive for much longer after this defeat, and a second Chinese Civil War is expected to begin not long after the Second American Civil War concluded.
I decided to turn my focus to Mexico, as after the cartels and the Zapatistas revolted, the country has been in a civil war for years on end. We need to support the government, for Mexico will never find peace under malicious cartels or idealist anarchists. However, while we sent our peacekeepers to Mexico, China fell into a new period of warlordism. Naturally, we need to pick a side in China. Ultimately, I decided to support the Nanking Provisional State, as it promised to establish democracy in China. But I thought it would be a bit before Nanking got moving, so in the meantime, I focused on Mexico. I decided to eliminate the anarchists, as Mexico is currently fighting a 2-front war, which, as history would say, is always a horrible idea. I was able to cut off several anarchist divisions and destroy them, then drive into the anarchist capital, eliminating them as a threat. I figured the situation in Mexico was stable enough, so I refocused on Nanking. The Peacebringer division in Nanking was focused on taking the coastal city of Hangzhou. The Ma clique, the one on the coast, was a pain in the ass, so taking the city took ages, but eventually we were able to take the city. In that same time though, the situation in Mexico had grown dire. The cartels had managed to surround Mexico City, so we had to break them out. I managed to bust the government's forces out of the encircled city and take out some cartel forces at the same time. But Mexico City is going to be under threat until the cartel threat is fully dealt with. So that became the priority. We ran down the cartels like they were nothing, and before we knew it, Mexico was fully under government control again. We went back to helping Nanking. The terrain and number of PLA troops made it hard to defeat the coastal warlords, but they were pretty weak. So we managed to pacify the PLAN garrison on the coast and pacified the PLA group in the south. The completion of our first mission to assist Nanking came at a good time, as tensions in Europe were heating up. Since the Soviets were defeated in the European War, a democratic revolution unfolded, led by Alexei Navalny. Although he was previously believed to be a pro-Western politician, since coming to power, he has unveiled his true colors as an ultra-nationalist, and has begun a new crisis in Europe over the small state of Kuban. A new war in Europe is inevitable. In the meantime, I refocused on the Congo. A few years ago, the Third Congo War began as the Democratic Republic of the Congo collapsed, and it expanded into the Central African Republic and the Republic of the Congo. We decided to support the Conservative Democrats, and there was a lot to do. The Conservative Democrats were allied to the Central African Republic, who was also in a civil war, due to a Christian occultist theocracy rising up. We killed the religious fanatics first. For some reason, Wagner took over after the occult were defeated. Weird. Just then, Russia officially declared war on Kuban. Kuban, having a guarantee of independence by Ukraine, subsequently drew in NATO, causing the Second European War. We fully plan on assisting NATO, but I wanted to finish up in Africa first. Luckily, our strong peacebringers were more than capable of absolutely destroying the other factions in the Congo, allowing for our side to declare victory and form the United States of Central Africa. For Europe, we sent 8 units combined to help NATO defend against the Russian invaders. 2 to Lithuania, 3 to Poland, and 3 to Ukraine. The peacebringers in Ukraine were just told to help hold the line in the south, while the peacebringers up north were ordered to push back the Russians in the Baltics and Belarus. We helped NATO cut off a lot of Russian troops, allowing us to help recapture Riga from the Russians. However, despite stopping the Russian advance, we also struggled to push because of Russia's sheer numbers. The war is going to go on for years like this. A decision needed to be made. There was a growing number of peacekeepers calling for a new approach to peacebringing. Until now, all of our interventions were indirect, so to speak. As in, we'd send in only a handful of units to restore peace. Although in smaller scale wars this worked, for a war like this, limited intervention only goes so far. That's why there was a growing number of peacekeepers calling for a direct intervention in the Second European War, as we were making very little progress with only 8 units. Well, 7 actually, because 1 got cut off by the Russians and destroyed. This will take forever if we don't step in. That is why we ultimately decided to do just that. The United Nations will directly intervene in the Second European War.
We come to you live with an unexpected development. The United Nations Interim Forces in America, led by Secretary General Sheila Pierce, are now fully intervening in the Second European War on the side of NATO. Sheila Pierce claims the intervention is fully necessary to prevent further harm from destroying Europe, like it has so many times in the past. Navalny claims this is a betrayal by the United Nations, but the United Nations claims that by going on so much expansion, Navalny has betrayed the values he so slowly defended.
All 3 ground armies consisting of armored peacebringers were sent to Europe to fight alongside NATO, which would be folded into our alliance, the New York Security Treaty Organization. We also added Mexico and Canada into the alliance, as Canada was able to rely on America for defense again, and Mexico low-key owed us after we saved their government. The only thing left to do was to wait for our peacebringers to get into position and begin the offensive into Russia to restore peace.
Listen, here comes the new parade. Listen, listen to voices on the parade. Many hands joining our new song. Many tongues singing our new song. Make way for the day of tomorrow. Make way for a world that is new. Tomorrow, together we'll all see it through. United Nations on the march, with flags unfurled. Together fight for victory of free new world.
Unfortunately, when Russia surrendered, my game crashed. I wasn't really interested in playing further anyway, so whatever. We had done what we set out to do. When Navalny's Russia collapsed, Russia would descend into a period of warlordism just as China had. We will help the Moscow Democratic Mandate unify Russia in due time, just as we are assisting the Nanking Provisional Government in reunifying China. By reuniting these authoritarian nations under true democratic regimes, we are guaranteeing world peace. Anyway, that's all I have for today. This mod was pretty fun. I did have some other submods enabled to see if they would make anything interesting happen, but they really didn't. Anyway, there was a new Collapsing World update pretty recently that added content to Zelda Russia, and I want to check it out. So that's probably what we're gonna do next. Anyway, I'm done yapping. Let's just chill. Not like us peacekeepers have anything to do anyways.